And just like that, we are back with another episode of the Baschamania podcast. I am your host, Justin Bash, and today we continue the road to the 2020 Olympic trials, which are just around the corner. Now, having wrestled in middle school and high school and participating in men's folk style, that's what I first became a fan of. That passion turned into a passion for freestyle only after watching and following the college level. Naturally, if you want to follow guys like Jordan Burroughs and David Taylor and Bo Nickel after their college careers, you have to be a fan and tune into men's freestyle. So for me, men's folk style and men's freestyle have been what I have followed and watched and grew a passion for the most. But with the talent and the success the U.S. has had on the women's side, because let's be honest, winning matters when it comes to getting fans to tune in and earning relevance. And honestly, I do think that's one area Greco has failed to grow. But with the success of the women's team, it is hard not to be a fan and tune in when a women's team wrestles these days, especially a year like this where almost every Olympic team member is potentially going to be a returning world medalist. That's some serious depth and talent. Just as men's freestyle has, I believe 5 out of the 6 Olympic weights have someone qualified for the Olympic trials who's a returning senior-level world medalist. I believe the only women's weight that doesn't is 62, and the only men's weight that doesn't is 65. Either way, all this to say, the more I watch and become a bigger fan of the women's side of the sport, I look at some of the staples of the sport, like Helen Maroulis and Victoria Anthony, and I want to get these stories out there. So today, Victoria Anthony is joining the show. And Victoria Anthony has such an amazing resume. She's placed 5th in the World Championships. She's a junior world champion. She's a U.S. Open champion. She's a Dave Schultz champion. She's a Bill Farrell champion. She's a 4-time WCWA College Nationals champion. She's a Junior Nationals champion. Her resume is just loaded with accomplishments, so I'm pumped to have her on the show today. Definitely the longest intro to an episode yet in the podcast, so I apologize for that. If you listen to this show, you know I'd love to get right into the meat of the conversation, which is bringing the guest on. So I'm going to waste no more time. Guys, real quick, if you are an avid listener to this podcast or you get a ton of value out of this episode and you want to support the podcast, the easiest thing you can do is subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. Just be sure to subscribe. And if you do want to support the show even further, there is now apparel, hats, stickers, magnets, all available at shop.baschamania.com. But even if you're just listening, I appreciate the support. All right, that's long enough for this intro. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show.
It's Baschamania! Let me tell you something, brother. He gave us everything he had in him tonight. What you gonna do when Baschamania runs wild on? Oh, it's gonna be a good one. And business just picked up here on the podcast. Oh, yeah.
All right, we've got Victoria Anthony, fresh off a international tour. How are you?
Woohoo, I am good.
It's funny, too, because when I saw you're traveling to Canada, and at the same time, like, preparing for this podcast, and I'm like, so you just got back from a trip from Italy and Russia. I'm like, do I got to add Canada to that list? I'm like, wait, I thought you were in Arizona. And
yeah, what's going on?
Earlier this week, and you're like, no, I lived there. So, first of all, tell me about that. Tell me about the decision to move to Canada.
For sure. I just really felt like I needed a few things in particular that I just wasn't getting in my training environment. One being female partners. I'm a 50 kilo, 110 pound, 4'10" girl. And just no matter how many different ways you try to set it up, 125 pound guys or high school boys, it's just not the same feel. So I really needed female training partners. Girls are like clingier, I would say, and like grabbier, especially if they're, wrestling me, they're trying to get a hold of me. So I needed that. The room in Calgary in particular is amazing. There's 2 Olympic champions in the room every day, one being Carol Wynn, who's a coach now, but she won my weight class in 2008. And then Erica Wiebe, who won 76 in 2016. And then another female, one of my best friends, she's a world silver medalist, Danielle Lapidge, another U23 bronze, that's a female. So It's just a really strong women's room. And in particular, other guy that I feel like, this all followed from was Paul Ragusa, who's our coach. And I've known Paul over the years, honestly, not that well, but he was at two of the big international competitions I was at over the summer. And he helped me, and I was like, man, I feel like his style suits me, and they're obviously doing something extremely right. So yeah, all things considered, I was like, okay, I'm going to make the move.
And how hard was that to like decide to make that sacrifice and saying the opportunity is too great? Like,
it was hard. I guess the decision itself wasn't hard, but getting myself to do it was difficult. I was supposed to leave Arizona like 3 weeks before I actually end up leaving. And I would like show up. Yeah, I would show up at like whatever the place I used to work out at called Northwest One, and they're like, "What are you doing here? Like, get out of here!" Yeah, like, and I was like, "Oh, I just don't want to leave." So it was difficult to get myself to make the move. Also, extremely cold, like completely different from I've been living in Arizona and I'm from California, so I haven't lived anywhere that has this cold weather. Luckily I missed it. Yeah, it got down to I think -30 with the wind chill, and I was like, oh my, like,
and
so difficult.
Speaking of cold weather, you just got back from Siberia in the winter. Perfect segue. Tell me about your trip to Italy and Russia and how that was. And I think too, it says so much, like Arizona, Canada, Russia, Italy. You've been to so many places that this sport provides such a unique opportunity to see, like Italy and Russia. That's such a contrast, right? Especially from the U.S. Like, tell me about that trip and what that was like.
Yeah, just on that note, it's unbelievable the places that you get to go with wrestling that there's no chance I would be going to Siberia otherwise.
Right.
If I was traveling the world and enjoying, I just wouldn't put that on my list.
Right.
And coincidentally, it's one of my favorite places in the world. Like, I absolutely love Krasnoyarsk. But I guess starting with Italy, that was a great trip. I first second round wrestled Sarah, which was a lot of fun, and it was just great to get a feel. So that's huge going into trials, and I'm so excited, and finished with a bronze at that tournament. And then we hopped on a plane, myself, Joey McKenna, and Pat Downey to Krasnoyarsk.
Yep.
Yeah, so fun. I love that tournament. I love the Russian fans. Like, I lost my first match to a Russian girl, and I'm like upset, obviously, especially in this tournament. It's like you never know what's going to happen. It's like, geez, did I just fly to Russia to be out of the tournament? Sure. And the Russian fans were so sweet to me. Like, multiple people in the arena and also like on Instagram were like, please message with whatever English they could, and we're like, please don't be sad. We loved your wrestling. Like, we really enjoyed your technique.
I saw one. Didn't one message Jakar Winchester?
Yes.
Thinking it was you or something?
Yeah.
Like
beautiful wrestling Victoria.
Yeah, it's so wild. And I'm curious too, like, take me back a little bit to when you got started. I had Helen on the podcast not too long ago, and we've been friends for a while, and she's been a client. And I pick her brain on this, but like when you were young, I think when you got started, wrestling still wasn't in the Olympics, right?
When I didn't start wrestling till 2005, so it was in the Olympics. Because I started pretty late in comparison to other people. I started 14, so.
So when you got started, was your goal right away, I want to be an Olympic champ?
It was, and it really was a transitional goal from judo. I did judo from when I was 6 years old till high school, and I wanted to be an Olympic champion in judo first. And then I ended up switching sports and was like, oh, well, I guess I'll just keep my goal. Right. I can do it in this sport too.
I want to be an Olympic champ, period.
Let's do it. Yeah.
And then what was it like, the sport for so long has been so much predominantly a man's sport. Like, what was the adversity like getting started, especially like in 2005, where, even somebody like Helen got started when they were so young, and then their parents and coach people start getting behind them because they're like, okay, wait, she's actually pretty good. I imagine as you're getting started a little bit later, people are kind of like, are you sure? Like, what was that like to kind of dive into that world?
For sure. I guess similar story. My freshman and sophomore year, it was kind of like, what are you doing here? Yep. And then it was like, oh, this girl is good, because I made it to boys masters in California my sophomore year, which in California it goes league, CIF, masters, and state. And so that was just a big deal, like to have done that. And so at that point, I felt like there was a shift in just people approaching me in the wrestling community, in the local Southern California wrestling community, just as a wrestler, more so than like, the girl that wrestles. To be honest, I didn't experience a ton of adversity like joining the team. It was more internal stuff that was super uncomfortable. And I know a lot of other younger girls deal with the same.
Sure.
It's like joining a boys wrestling team in the first place is social suicide at the school. It's like I now don't fit in with the girls really, and then I obviously don't fit in on the boys wrestling team. Yeah, I'm not a boy, so I don't even know how to wrestle. So it's not like I have some skill set. It did help that I had judo, but it wasn't like I was coming in with some great skill set from youth wrestling.
Right.
So it was more just a lot of internal struggle and just discomfort day in and day out with that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then what kind of adversity did you face, like even internally? Was it like questioning your decisions, or what kind of adversity was it like that you had to overcome?
I think it was not questioning my decision in the first place. That was just getting myself to go into the wrestling room to join the team was extremely difficult. It took me, so the reason I joined wrestling is because I saw a demonstration. I was in PE, I was in freshman year PE, and I saw a wrestling demonstration from my eventual high school coach. And I was like, man, this looks like judo. And honestly, if you play a sport in California, it gets you out of PE class. So I was like, man, I hate PE. This is the worst. So I was like, I guess I'll try it. But from that point, it still took me 2 weeks to, walk into the wrestling room doors. And I was like, do I really want to do this? I don't know. And then just that whole year, nothing became more comfortable. It became more uncomfortable every day with, the workouts and the struggles. But that's what I also fell in love with. And that's also what I think kept me in wrestling as opposed to going back to judo, because I was trying to compete at a high level in judo. Like I said, my intention was to become an Olympic champ, but I went back and competed a bit, and I was like, this doesn't have the same like pull on my heart as wrestling now does. So.
And it's interesting too because I believe you won a junior world championship in 2009, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which now sounds which is a crazy thing to accomplish, but it now sounds even more of an accomplishment knowing you didn't start to 2005. So like you started your first practice 4 years later, you're a junior world champ. Like that's nuts. How did you evolve so fast?
Definitely the judo background helped. It's still so integral to the techniques that I use. Like I use my feet and my legs a lot more than probably most wrestlers do, with sweeps and trips and throws.
Yeah, you kind of like those inside trips.
I like those things. Yeah, I don't even try to hit them anymore. I'm like, oh, there it is again. I actually try to not hit it so I can, expand my technique in other directions. But definitely judo, and then just work ethic and good coaching, people that accepted me in Southern California. I think it can be really difficult for girls in places that just have no support. I get messages from younger girls all the time that are like, they just don't want me in the room here. Like, I don't know what to do. I want to wrestle, but I can't, like, I don't know if I should continue to deal with this. And I'm like, man, that's tough, because I did. My high school coach, Dennis Baramo, shout out to Dennis. I'm so thankful for him because he just accepted me. I don't think he really knew what to do with me, but he treated me exactly the same as everybody else. He's like, this seems like a good strategy. Yeah. He yelled at me the same. He made me run the same amount of sprints, and he didn't treat me as an outsider, and he didn't baby me. So maybe a little bit, I think, because I would emotionally react.
And do you think that this being so good, do you think that helped overcome adversity too? Like, I know that, I guess I can make the same argument for being good or bad. Like, if you're really good, you have a lot of pressure and adversity. I wrestled JV and varsity. It was never any good. And you deal different adversity. Like, it's like, man, like, yeah, this is teaching me discipline, but I just got my butt whooped again and again. I'm not going to make the team. Like, there's different adversity. Do you think that because you were so good that it kind of helped move past some of those hurdles where it's like, I feel like if you're good, it's almost easier to accept a woman on a men's team because, well, she's really good. What are we going to do? Where it's like, I feel like a huge struggle could be for someone who's like, okay, I want to give this a shot, and they're not really good. I feel like then the adversity is even harder to overcome.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I would agree for sure. At least there was like a spark. I wouldn't say I was good, especially at the outset. And I was still getting my butt whipped all the time, but there was something, people could see in me, so that probably made it a little bit easier. But on the other side of that, I think just when someone sees pure work ethic in a young kid or a young female athlete, or just the willingness they've fallen down 8 times, get up nine, and just
Sure.
keep going, it's the same spark. So I think, we're presented with so much adversity in the sport, and it comes at every individual in their individual way, and that's what they're meant to work with. And that's what eventually makes them, grows us into the people that we are. So.
And the other side of that conversation, I think, too, is, like you got started in part because you saw a demonstration. You're like, I think I can do this. And, one of the things I'm curious of, and this is like a 3-part question, but I guess the first part of
Okay.
it is you got started after like a demonstration and saying, this is pretty cool. Now, I feel like there's a whole new wave. I feel like there's seasoned vets, yourself, Helen, Adeline. You guys are like, in my opinion, a new wave of vets. Like when you were young, even when you saw, like, it wasn't because you saw necessarily somebody winning. Like now people
Right.
see you, Helen, Adeline, all these girls so successful, and I think that's why you're seeing the rapid growth of the sport. Because like the fans always, to get fans, you got to start with the youth, and as that
Right.
comes up, and as more and more kind of teams turn over, you get more fans. And I'm curious what the difference is in the sport that you've seen over the last decade, really, where there now is so many women wrestling for little girls to look up to. Like, how is that different from when you got started? Where I don't think back then. I mean, U.S. didn't have an Olympic champ till Helen won in 2016, right? Like, it's only the
Right.
last 4 years that women in this country have a gold medalist to look up to.
Yeah,
What's the
absolutely.
difference been like watching that kind of continue to evolve?
Yeah. You know what? I'd actually disagree a little bit. I'd just say that I think the growth probably has a lot more to do with the interconnectedness of the world at this
Okay.
point, and social media. Because in 2005, there was if you didn't know of like maybe Sarah McMahon or someone by a camp, or you were
Yeah.
paying attention to the previous Olympic team trials, you just wouldn't know. I didn't know of any of those women. But now
Sure.
it's so easy to go on your phone. Like USA Wrestling, I think they do a great job. Flow Wrestling does a great job of pushing people and getting names out there, and then so younger
Totally.
girls are able to see that girls in like both across the country and across the world. So it's much easier to be like, oh my gosh, girls wrestle. You see it on your phone. And you're like, I guess I could. I
Yeah.
give it, give it a go. And then
Yeah.
also, of course, the girls look up to us, look up to the women's team as a whole for the success. But at the same time, I think it's like with social media, you're able to express your personality.
Sure.
And I almost think more people look up to me or want to interact with me because they feel like I'm approachable and they can. So I don't know. I think social media has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. On my marketing side of what I do daily, I talk to a lot of athletes about the importance of social media and branding. And somebody I refer to a lot is Lolo Jones. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
she
Mhm.
hasn't won the Olympics yet, but she's
Exactly.
got such
Yeah.
a dominating brand because she's relatable, because she's engaging, she's got that personality where she's inspiring people, she's making people laugh, she's got a lot of humor. Like, that's the power of social media to say you don't necessarily have to be an Olympic champ just to be a brand. It might be your goal, and that's a dang good goal. But just from a social media, the amount of awareness it can create, and I think too, like you said, the fact that you can go on, social media or follow USA Wrestling or Flow and see other people and connect with them. I think that's why the world's reacting the way they are to Kobe's death. Like
Mhm.
so many people didn't know him, but they looked up to him, and you could
For
see
sure.
the impact somebody had by just following somebody. And now you get
Yeah.
more direct access. Where I love following you on social because like you're
Mhm.
telling stories, like the
Thank you.
stories of like the couch, right, or
Yeah, of my
traveling, like
mishaps, my day-to-day
right.
vortexes.
But that's
Uh,
but that's what people can relate to, and I think that's how you kind of create fans because you feel that bond. Have did you when did you kind of start feeling that, and did you get to start feeling that from being a fan of other women in the sport? because as the seasoned vet group, I'll call you girls, it's like you guys are so good and so many people look up to you. Did you have that at all? And was there a certain period in time you started to have that?
To be honest, not really. I didn't have it growing up, and I didn't. First of all, I was like just shell shocked the whole time. Like when I was in high school, I was like wide eyed and confused, and didn't really like latch on to anyone as like a hero in that sense. I'd say more now so than ever. I look up to my teammates. I look up to, even people that I used to wrestle Clarissa Chun, but I look up to her. I look up to her currently so much as a role model, as a technician, just as a great person as well. So I didn't necessarily have it when I was coming through in high school and college, but now that I think my viewpoint's a little bit wider, I do. Yeah, and just to go back to the point on Lolo real quick, I think it's actually really important that we as athletes and figures like herself, continue to do their bit on social media and are relatable, because the majority of the population isn't going to win an Olympic gold medal. The majority of kids aren't going to be. It's just by the numbers, they're not going to be the state champ or national champ. It's a select few. But it's so important to inspire everyone to do their absolute best and to become the most they can be. So I think it's like sometimes I feel like people get like, oh, she hasn't even done anything, but she's doing it. She's being herself and doing the best she can, and that's what we should be aiming to help other people do.
And I want to talk about that in a few minutes, like judging success and titles and all that. But kind of one of the other points really to that question is the initial question is how you've seen the sport evolve from your involvement. Like you've had so many opportunities, I imagine, as you continue to get better, but as the women's side of the sport continues to evolve, I imagine so do the opportunities. Like even getting the opportunity to be welcomed into Canada, right? Like what has happened, like as the sports evolved, what kind of opportunities has that opened up for you?
It's honestly unbelievable. Like you can take this sport as far as you want to and in as many different directions as you want to. It gave me the opportunity to do my undergraduate in Canada. I moved to BC. The school's in Burnaby, but it's pretty much the Vancouver area, Simon Fraser University, which I love. Like the opportunity to live in Vancouver, pretty much the Vancouver area for 4 years, is my favorite city in the world. So cool. And then just the continued opportunities of travel. Now, we're getting paid better and better every year. Sponsorships are coming in more. And also just the ability to, like you mentioned before, like build out a brand. And that's something you can do, on an individual level. And it's great that the sport allows that segue. And I just love it because the most important thing to me is inspiring young girls and young women. And so if anyone, they're like, you wrestle? And I'm like, yeah, your daughter should too. She can go to college like for free. And it's probably going to be a little bit easier than, softball or soccer, where there's so many girls in the country that are doing it. So the opportunities are expansive, and there's just a path right now that is less dense than I think others.
And I'm curious too, like, the final, I guess, part to that is really how your career has evolved. What has the transition been like? Like I ask so many guys who come on the podcast what the transition was like from youth level to high school, and from high school to college, and then from college to the senior level. And I'm curious on your perspective, what has yours been like from that same journey from, high school to college to senior level? Because it's so different. Like there's the different college structures. There's all sorts of things. What has that involvement been like?
Sure. High school to college was just so different because I'm going from a boys' high school wrestling team to an all-women's team. But my school, SFU, women and men trained alongside each other. We trained in the same room and mostly the same practices. So it wasn't that big of a transition, actually. It's just the transition of having to go to class and having to be responsible for yourself, having full access to the dining hall 24 hours a day, and that type of thing. It's learning self-control. I ate so many cookies my freshman year, and I was so fluffy. So that was probably the bigger transition. At that point, I was already, on the national level. I made my first national team in 2012. So I wasn't actually up at school yet, but the transition to the senior level, I feel like more than anything, it's like a competitive transition of tactics and strategy and not doing too much, basically, especially as as I get older. I'm 28 now. So what I could and what was best to do when I was 21, 22 is so different from now. And right now it's pretty much you run the risk of doing too much a lot,
Right. Yeah.
and you can't do anything if you're injured. So, and then tactically and strategically, international high level wrestling that comes into play way more than it ever has in my career. Now and in these competitions, and if I matches I lose, it's generally something strategic, tactical.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I'm curious too, speaking of like winning and losing, I'm really curious always on an athlete's perspective on success. And I was just kind of thinking about it selfishly the other day because somebody was asking about this podcast, and is your podcast successful? And like it made me think, because for my companies, success is a bit more black and white. It's like, are you making a profit? Okay, it's successful. Or are you losing money? Okay, it's not. With the podcast, it's like, it's not that it's new, because podcasting has been around, but it's newer that there's only so many metrics I can go by. And I view, success as, I forgot who was just on the podcast that said, maybe Bryce Meredith was saying how success is happiness. And I've always kind of viewed success as freedom and doing what you love. And like for this podcast, when I get text messages from people that are like, hey, me and my kids this morning, as we got ready for school and work, we listened to so-and-so on the podcast. And I'm picturing, like, I can't listen to myself talk for 30 seconds. And I can't imagine somebody putting on like an hour. Thankfully, it's more like all you athletes. But, that's like, for me, makes it so successful and humbling. Like, I'm reaching people, and you might get to encourage somebody that would have never got to hear something specific. Like, that to me is successful. Yeah. And I know it's always a cliche in sports. Like you judge success by wins and losses to a degree, but I think we make it harder and harder. Like once wrestling, especially, is such a "what have you done for me lately" sport. If you didn't just win something, you're irrelevant. It doesn't matter how good you are. Even Dake looked incredible in Italy, and all of a sudden it's Dake's making the team, Burroughs is out. I'm like, wait, what? Like, Dake's incredible, but like, is Jordan not the GOAT until he gets beat? Like he's, and so I feel like, Lolo Jones is a great example of, I don't think she would judge her success solely on an Olympic gold or an Olympic medal. I think she judges her success, obviously, by wanting to win and winning championships, which you've done, winning the NWCA college duels, U.S. Open, Junior World Champion. Like, you've had your success, so it's not cliche if you say, like, it's getting to encourage people and it's getting to build that brand. But I am curious on your perspective on kind of defining success and what success both looks like to you and then what it means to you.
I think being intentional in life, that's one of the most important things. And it's like one of the pillars that I live by is have intention and follow through. And so I personally measure my success against my intentions. So it's like, what am I intending to do? Yeah, I'm definitely intending to win an Olympic gold medal. So with that intention, if I achieve it, it'll be a success. If I don't, I would say I was unsuccessful in that, intention.
Sure.
That intent. But one of my other major intents is to affect people positively. And so, can I say at the end of the day, have I done that? And have I done that on the scale, the maximum scale that I had the ability to,
right.
And done the most that I could with that. So that's another intention. Whereas so Lolo probably, is successful in that. Right. And then it goes, you can break that down into so many different ways. So we'll take the Bill Farrell, for example. Like I won the competition, but that wasn't my intention. So my intentions were to improve specific areas in my wrestling, to execute in the hand fight, to do certain things tactically. And so that's what I go back and check, like, was I successful in the things that I intended for? And then that's how I would say I measure success personally. And then for sure on the, I agree with Bryce, and just general success, it's happiness and enjoying your life. But I don't really struggle with that.
Right.
So life is good. Everything's good. It's like, this is such an amazing life. So definitely success in that, right? But I would say it's intention based. And I think it's important that we, set intentions. It's like my intentions are going to be different from someone else's. Maybe another person's is just to acquire a particular sum of money, which is all good. And that's just how they would measure their success. And so it just depends on what you're aiming at.
And I think it's cliche that, everybody always says like it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. But, like the more successful wrestlers and athletes I talk to, I like this, the defining success with intention. I want to say when Gilman was on the podcast, he had mentioned too, like having was he the progress goals, I want to say he called it.
Yeah, probably process goals.
Yeah, maybe, sure. I didn't go to college.
Progress, process, same thing.
So, like having goals along the way, and then because like one of I think the way it got brought up is I'm like, how do you? And this is where I was going to go with you. When you have those definitions of intent, and you kind of answered this, but one of the things I asked him is, it's so tough. I remember for him, he was in a Flow documentary, and he had mentioned one of the hardest things he had to do is the day after not winning NCAAs, look in the mirror and say, you're never going to be an NCAA champion, and move on.
Oh, that hurt.
Right. And not get discouraged. And I'm like, man, I feel like I'd lock myself in my room and not come out for 3 weeks. And I part of, I think, just analyzing it, it's like if he's creating this habit of setting these short-term goals and he's hitting it, winning this goal and achieving this, that one goal at the end doesn't feel like such a devastating loss because you had so many wins along the way. And I'm curious for you, like you've had both wins and losses, and you've won tournaments, and you've been runner-up, and you've taken bronze, and I'm curious what kind of approach you take to when like you said, you have an intent to encourage and to kind of be that light for people, and you also have an intent to be an Olympic champ. When you don't hit one goal, what's the process like? Is it just relying on your happiness from the other intents and hitting those? Like what's the approach and the mindset look like to not hit a goal and not get discouraged by it, or not get too discouraged by it enough to where you're pressing on without failure?
Right. You know what? For me personally, it's like, did I do the best I could? Like the absolute best. There's some saying about turning stones over. Did I turn every stone over?
Right.
That type of thing. And if I can look myself in the eye and say that I did that. Personally, I'm just not going to get too down over it. It is what it is. Life is ups and downs. I believe that we're here in order to learn certain lessons, and we're just meant to continue to learn the whole way through.
Sure.
And there's never going to be a point where something isn't a lesson. If it's a loss, it's a lesson.
Right.
So, I just don't, I feel like life is way too short to be, going the whole, like barricading yourself in and just being so upset. Of course, things hurt and it's painful, but it would be the most painful thing for me would be to not have done everything possible, to not have done my best, to have chosen to stay in my comfort zone when I knew there was an opportunity for me to grow and I didn't take it.
Right.
Just moved to Canada. Like if I had stayed in Arizona and it didn't work out, that would hurt me deep. Like that would be really, really hard for me to, handle and hard for me to move on from. But if every single day I'm pushing myself to be in these uncomfortable situations and I'm just extracting the most from myself, I'm asking other people to help me extract the most from myself, whether it, works out or it doesn't, which I believe it's going to work out. I truly believe I'm going to be an Olympic champion. I'll be proud of myself and I'll be proud of my efforts and all that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think you very well could be the Olympic champion this year. And, let's kind of talk 2020. So, if I have this all correct, in 2012, you were third at the Olympic trials. In 2016, you're the runner-up.
Yes.
So, being a numbers guy and a patterns and OCD type guy, you went from 3 to 2. The obvious progression here would be 1 in 2020, yes. which works out nicely. And playing back to the fact that you are the seasoned vet, like it's weird watching the commentary around the Pan Am trials and the Olympic trials, and you and Helen, you guys accomplished so much. and yet some are viewing you as an underdog because of how good the younger wrestlers are. And I'm curious at what your perspective is to have that feeling where it's like, I know Burroughs and I talk about it often, how, you know, especially in wrestling, the older you get, the more you get scouted. And this is such a young person sport. It is like the youth meaning like the younger of a person in a match so often has the upper hand. And I'm curious, you know, you've continued to evolve, and I'm curious what's your perspective to get you to that number one spot in 2020 in a few months here to make the Olympic team, knowing that, you know, throughout your career, not only have you evolved, but your competition's evolved. Women's wrestling has evolved. There's such a bigger talent pool. I remember having a conversation with someone a couple of years ago about, you know, sometimes people don't like that Greco and women's wrestling doesn't get as much attention as men's freestyle. And my argument is, listen, I think winning creates relevance. And when the women's team started winning, so many people started watching like crazy.
Yeah,
you know, and there's definitely so many points to the conversation, but I've always said, like, I think women's wrestling viewership kind of skyrocketed because if you look at the Olympic team this year, I think almost every person in the Olympic team could be a returning world or Olympic medalist. Like, it's wild. So I'm curious, as that's all evolved, what your approach is this Olympic year to complete that perfect pattern of 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
Done.
You know what? I genuinely believe it doesn't have anything to do with anyone else. It has to do with me, and my, like, the areas that I needed to, the gaps that I needed to fill, in my like ability to compete and technically those types of things. It is interesting that, you know, the spread of ages, especially in my weight category,
Right.
there's so many girls like there. I'm in the veteran group now, but there's even a veteran group beyond me, which is Whitney Condor and Alyssa Lambie,
Sure.
who are, I think, 30 and 31 or 32,
Yeah.
and I'm 28. So we have like every generation
Right.
really going for it and really with a shot to, you know, to do it. So it's interesting. It's fun. But personally, I don't even see people for age or that type of thing. And I think it could be a little bit, I think there's value in knowing, okay, yeah, maybe I have the upper hand veteran wise, or they have the upper hand with you. So yeah, take those things into consideration, but like, don't get it twisted. Like, Whitney is as strong, as hungry, as all the other things that you'd expect a young athlete to be. And that could be a major mistake on any person's part if they were to take something like that for granted. So age-wise, I just don't invest that much. I see each individual as the makeup of the competitor that I know is in front of me, and everybody has their different skill set, both mentally, emotionally, tactically. All these things come into play, and you have to look at all of those when you're up against people on their, you know, everyone's going to be peaked. It's their best day. It's, you know, I expect myself to, in my mind, it's like I have to be able to beat people when they're having their best day, and it's somehow my worst day. So taking it in strides like that.
And I'm curious, you know, kind of taking these last few questions in two kind of different directions. One is, and they're both really just kind of curiosity. I'm curious, you've had such a wide variety of accomplishments. I'm just curious, in this sport, nothing non-wrestling related, what are you the absolute most proud of, do you think, that you've done or been a part of within the sport?
Oh, that's a great question.
Like, I don't want to say, like, don't say winning something, like being a junior world champion or winning the Open. Like, those are all things great. But I don't know. I feel like you've done so much, and I'm sure it's not an easy answer. But I'm curious.
I think I have an answer. I don't really know if it's what you're aiming at, but the thing that I'm most proud of is my ability to never get discouraged and to continue to evolve match by match, you know, tournament by tournament. And every single match, like, I'm more excited about wrestling because I'm like, ooh, that was another piece I didn't have that I now do. You know, losing in Eureka, I got my butt whooped my first match. It's embarrassing. Like, just overall, it wasn't. I haven't had a match like that in I don't know how long.
That can happen in Russia.
It can happen in Russia. It was sloppy. It was all over the place, you know. But there were major lessons that came from that match, and so I think I'm proud of my ability to extract the most from every situation I can to learn and grow, and just to continue to do that year after year and truly be shaped by that ability.
And kind of not really the opposite end of that spectrum, but you know, wrestling's such a sport where like once you hit that 30, 31 age, you know, maybe 32, like people are done in the sport, at least competing wise. And as you inch towards that kind of age where people start to say, hey, I'm done on the competition side, what are your plans post competition? Do you know yet, or have you given it much thought?
I've given it a lot of thought. There's so many different directions that could play out, and I feel like it's like one of those mystery books where the story could end this way or this way or this way.
Right.
Because I am 28. I'm inching towards that stopping point with wrestling,
Right.
but I could easily. I've never seen myself going past 2020, but now that I'm up against it, I think my body is 100% fine. I don't have any injuries. My mind is fine. I'm growing. Like I said, I'm growing every match, every day. And it's still so fun. And I do believe I actually still have a lot, like technically, that I'm still learning. There's just a lot of learning left within the sport. Of course, I don't think anyone ever stops learning with this sport,
Right.
which is why we love it. So there is the potential to go another quad. I don't see myself doing that, but it is there. And then I have always seen myself fighting after wrestling.
Really? Like MMA?
Like that stuff.
You wrestlers that want an MMA fight, and it's not even said.
Well, I don't even know yet.
It's just.
I can't say, that's another thing. I really can't say for sure because I've never been punched in the face. I've never been in a scrap like with another girl like outside a club. Nothing. I have nothing under my belt fight wise, except for judo and jiu-jitsu. I did judo competitively for 8 years, and then I competed in jiu-jitsu a little bit before I ever stepped on a wrestling mat. So for me, it's more about the fact that I love martial arts. What's crazy is when I was a little girl, I had a poster of ninjas above my bed. Like all I wanted to be was a ninja.
So did I, but they were Ninja Turtles.
I think, I have a better chance of becoming a ninja than you do of a turtle. But it's cool because now becoming a ninja is a legitimate career path for myself. It's insane, the growth of women's MMA. And I love martial arts. I love the discipline involved. I'll 100% circle back after I'm done with my wrestling career to jiu-jitsu, to other martial arts that I've always, wanted to try my hand at. So it's like, well, if I'm going to do it anyway, I may as well do it and, fight.
What's the difference in your mind of why you'd get to a stopping point with wrestling but keep going with MMA or judo?
It would be recreational if I were judo, jiu-jitsu, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But MMA over wrestling because of the ability to have a true career and that's maybe I didn't say that right. Like the potential to make money, basically. Wrestling is just it's not it right now. It's hard to make a living. I think it's easier for men with the RTCs and them getting paid pretty well and the sponsorships that are available. But on the women's side, it's just we're just not experiencing the same financially, and it's tough. It's definitely tough. And it's like I just don't necessarily want to continue to live, based off low stipends and that kind of thing. So I love the sport. If more becomes available financially, that would make it a lot easier to go another quad. It's like I do feel like I have a lot of wrestling left in me, but I want to build for my future as well. And MMA provides that opportunity.
And even on the men's side, like, I've had a string of guests now on the podcast that keep saying they want to go fight. And, like, one of the things Bryce Meredith, I think, alluded to was that same concept of, look at, I've always kind of been infatuated with fighting, but there's also, look at how big the arena is. Look at how much of an opportunity there is for career growth. And, even on the men's side of wrestling, if you're not one of the absolute top tier guys, you're still like, we're starting to get to a point where I feel like a lot of the top men are getting paid really good. But if you're not on the national team or if you're not up there, like, it's still like, if you're like, look at the weight class Bryce is in with guys like Zane and Yanni and J.O. and Molinaro, all these guys, like you're a 2-time NCAA finalist and he's not even qualified for the trials yet. Like, and that's going to reflect on the, financial gain or loss you have. So I definitely get it. I just think it's absolutely wild to get punched in the face just for a challenge.
It might be. We're gonna find out. I have to have someone punch me in the face first, and then I'll make a decision. And then you might see me in 2024.
You might as well get that. You might as well get that content, by the way. To like, if somebody's gonna punch you in your face,
Yeah,
if nothing else, that's
true.
gonna hurt. At
True.
least that's good Instagram content.
Uh-huh.
And so,
Yeah.
one of the final things we'll kind of talk about and let you go here is just content and social media. And we kind of talked about being able to build a brand. And I have a lot of offline conversations with successful athletes and coaches about social media. And I've received every kind of side to the conversation you can get, from it's a distraction, don't do it. It doesn't help with your goals, don't do it. And on the other side, it's like, there's people in this sport, won't name names, but they can win and they're still not that relevant. So they don't get that brand deal because they didn't establish that audience. They didn't establish that, because the times have changed. Now, somebody like Lolo Jones is getting more brand deals than somebody who potentially won a gold medal, because that gold medal winner doesn't have the audience. I'm curious.
Sure.
I'm curious, and like, I follow you on social, but I was doing like a deep dive before the podcast. And first of all, this is absolutely crazy, by the way. Did you know, and anybody listening is probably going to think I'm lying because this doesn't make sense. Your video, you versus Vinesh from India, at the 2017 World Championships, is UWW's most viewed YouTube video of all time, and it's not even close. Your match with her got 2.6 billion views. 2.6
billion. You said billion? No way.
Or million.
No,
Sorry,
million. No,
million.
for sure.
Sorry.
Million.
I got ahead of myself. I got so excited. 2.6 million views. And the next closest is when Snyder beat Said Live in Paris with 1.9 million. So 0.7 million higher. Like, that's crazy. Like, I'm just like looking up content. I'm like, man, she does such a good job. And I stumbled on one of your match videos, and I was watching it, and I'm like, holy crap, this video has 2.6 million views. I'm like, this can't be the norm for UWW. And so then I did some research, and so it's crazy. Like, I don't know what happened there that made this one match like the most viewed match of all time, but
it's super bizarre. I agree. One of the things I chalk it up to is like, I'm like, I think the population of India might have something to do with it.
Sure.
Because it's so bizarre. It's honestly pretty strange.
Yeah.
Vinesh has since won a bronze medal at certain things, but I don't exactly know, but it's cool.
And if you look at like the next, like Snyder and Said Live, like how many gold medals they have combined, like, okay, I kind of get that. But anyways, that was kind of a bunny trail. But I'm just curious, like, what your perspective is on using social media. And, I think there's a generation coming up now that is obsessed with social media. And this generation is like all about likes and followers. And I've had some talks with some college coaches, because next year the NCAA looks like is going to let NCAA athletes profit off their likeness. And now I feel like that obsession could grow. If all of a sudden a college wrestler can get sponsored or get a brand deal, man, they're going to care that much more about their followers. They're now, forget the offline distraction of trying to manage that brand deal if you can get one, but it's going to put more of an emphasis on it. And I love social media. I think no matter what, every conversation I'll have, like some of the best and worst moments of my life have stemmed from social media. But I always think social media is net positive. I mean, I'll say this, and I've said it, this isn't the first time on the podcast. My wife DM'd me, and that's initially how we met. Like,
sick.
And, it was real casual. Like, it was something about something my company did, and she's like, "Hey, that's awesome." And we kind of, that evolved into a conversation, which led to coffee, and the rest is kind of history. But I think social's net positive. I've grown my business, and even meeting someone like you, I can DM you and be like, "Hey, you should come on the podcast. Sure. Let's talk about a couple things." Like, I think it's net positive, but it can be such a distraction. There are so many negatives, and I've never been a high level athlete, so I can't test to getting on social and reading about yourself. Like, thank God I'm not important enough where people have an opinion on me and are like, oh, hey, you should do this or you should do that. Like, I'll pick on myself more than anyone, so you don't even have to. But I've never had the distraction of looking at rankings or, hey, this is what so-and-so is saying about me at the Olympic trials. Or how have you managed to use social to continue building a brand and building a following, but have not gotten distracted by it?
Right. I mean, I definitely have had my bouts with distraction by it, which is one of the reasons I'll have to say I don't love it. I don't love social media.
Sure.
I only use Instagram at this point. I'm sorry to anybody that follows me on Twitter and Facebook, but I just don't. I'll post from my Instagram to those accounts, but my life is the most important thing to me. And enjoying my life and my time here on Earth, and
Sure.
and I just don't like being so deeply like reliant on my cell phone and being so deeply connected. But on the other side of it, it's amazing how social media is able to connect people, and I'm able to connect with fans from across the world. It's so beautiful in that right. But I do worry about I worry about myself and I worry about the younger generation.
Yeah.
I didn't grow like I was probably like one of the last generations to grow up without social media at the start of my life. But like my younger cousins, for example, it's just crazy to think that, young girls grow up, having this thing in their hand and like scrolling Instagram, and that's completely normal. But the things that are on their screen a lot of times are not real. I mean, the fact that it's a snippet of somebody's life that they are choosing for you to see in itself, but then also editing apps, true physical edits, like girls, injections, surgeries, all these things. And these are things that have millions and millions of views and hits and that type of stuff on Instagram. So that freaks me out for these younger girls who are then, comparing themselves. It's only natural to compare yourself. And you're like, is that what I'm supposed to look like? Like, that's not what I look like at all. So I think it's tricky in that way, and I think it's really important because of that to stand for authenticity and just to be honest with I'm kind of segueing, but just even with myself with like certain beauty routines. Like if I get my eyebrows done, like I want these girls to know that like these are not necessarily my eyebrows, that type of thing. But so I really like it for its ability to connect, like you said, meeting people, being able to just collaborate in an instant. That's amazing. And also like that the fact that I can connect with young fans in that way. But then the like kind of dark side of social media, I think it's really important to be aware of it, and then the distraction aspect. It's so easy. These apps are designed to distract us, and it's like I go into my phone for a specific purpose, and it's like I black out, and 5 minutes later I'm still on Instagram. I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I even in here? So I really have to be aware of it. Like if I post a lot of times if I post something, I'll delete the phone off my app. I'll delete the app off my phone, for the rest of the day or whatever, just so I'm not so distracted by it. And I think people have to give themselves grace with it too. For myself, I was like, man, I was kind of getting upset with myself for how distracted I was by this app. And I'm like, it's also designed to do this, and it's designed to play on my human characteristics. So, And also, like, I'm not mad at anybody for using these types of apps because it's a digital promotion. So you're not going to pose for a magazine and expect them to put out the first picture they take and, an unedited version of it. And for me, I'm using my social media for marketing. So I am going to do, edits here and there and edit the brand, whatever it is, whatever it may be. So I think, for myself, I just have to kind of always reel myself in, and be aware of it, and, not be in my DMs all day trying to respond to people. And because I want to do my best with responding, things like that. But, being aware that I have to cut it off at some point. I can't respond to everybody. And then just the apps and editing that, I hope other people recognize both sides of it. Like, you are using this for marketing, and promotion of yourself. But then also don't get too caught up in comparing and contrasting, and just, I don't think that there's any value in comparing ever, honestly. It's not good. It doesn't do much for the person.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it definitely takes a lot of self-awareness, and that's why I asked you, because I know every athlete seems to take a different approach with it, and it also impacts people differently. Like you use it differently, so there's going to be different self-awareness for you. Who
Right.
some like you have a great personality, you're able to show that, so different things are going to apply, and other people, I know some people struggle with they they fake content because they are more of a dud. And they don't have that personality
Right.
where they can just
Yeah.
and so you're almost forcing to try to post something. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't
And
think
I do
there's a
think
one
that
size fits all for people.
I don't. I think the most, what I learned over the years, and I think this is one of the more important things you can do is just be authentic. Even if you are a dud, there's other duds out there like
Sure,
that are, need
totally.
to find their dud tribe.
Yeah,
So everyone, we're all human. We're all, in my opinion, we're more alike than we are different. And there's just a lot that goes with being authentic, and there's a lot of value, and you feel more whole and complete as a person when you're being authentic and you're not trying to fit some mold, or okay, this is what seems to be getting likes over here, so let me try
right.
to do that. Like, if you're who you authentically are and you're just trying to be your best and do your best, people are going to gravitate towards that. And again, everybody has their little tribe, whether it's
Yeah,
duds or whatever it is. So those
yeah.
people are looking for somebody, and they won't be able to find you if, or whoever, if you're not being authentically who you are.
Totally. And that's why I think too, like being able to look at it and say like, look at, you also can't judge on the other side of it where it's like, listen, don't judge somebody for posting who they are, because they're doing what they love and they're trying
Yeah,
to
yeah,
maybe they're using social media for promotion because like you said, like, okay, there's only so much money in women's wrestling that it'd be hard to go another cycle. If you can use social media and post more content, but one person's looking at it saying, oh, you should get off social media, or oh, you should do this. Well, I think people sometimes need to look at social on both sides, and one side don't compare, and on the other also don't assume you know why they're doing that. Like before
yeah,
you're even
absolutely.
comparing, like don't assume you know why someone's posting that. Or there's people who think I'm obsessed with my phone because I'm on it
Hmm.
24/7, and it's not that I love it. Like I don't have a single game on my phone. I'm
Uh-huh,
just
uh-huh.
if somebody
It's a necessity.
right, if somebody like
Yeah.
I this happens a couple times a year. Somebody in the wrestling community just tweeted out to like everybody. If you had one person who you had to 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 one person